Thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining us, Leonce Bernard Crump Jr., right?
Bernard.
All right. Good, solid name. So thank you so much for taking time out to join us. I do appreciate it.
Hey, glad to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I think kind of one of the best ways for people to get to know you, and the way we like to kick this off, is to really just like run through some of the roles that you're playing and balancing right now, professionally and personally as well. And we'll use that as a mechanism to really get to know you.
Yeah. I would say I'm a son first. As a person of faith, I would say I'm a son of God first, son of my parents. I'm a husband. I'm a father of 4, which has produced these white hairs in my very, very short beard. By the way, your beard is glorious.
It's got a lot of white hairs too.
Listen, this is 4 full weeks of growth on my chin, so that tells you a lot too. I am a pastor, and I guess some would say CEO of the organization side of that entity. I'm a board member on 4 different nonprofit boards. I'm a friend, of course, and a brother. We got one younger brother. He's a retired naval intelligence officer.
Wow.
I'm a student and an athlete. That's and a nerd, book nerd.
A book nerd.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to just kind of dive in and learn a little bit more about those roles. Now, we've met through kind of a mutual friend, Tom Lutz, who I've actually had on the podcast.
Yeah.
And through kind of really your experience as starting up your church. Tell us a little bit about your church and starting it up.
Yeah, I'll tell you. The way I've described church, startups especially, is we are in a flooded market with a product that no one knows they need or want, right? And may very well reject when it's offered. And so starting a church is an interesting endeavor because you have the spiritual component. You're trying to gather a people around Jesus, around the way of Jesus. And from my vantage point, of course, I believe that is not only for individual good, but for the common good, for the flourishing of human beings. And you have all the things that go into that: preaching, teaching, small groups, Sunday gatherings, worship songs, public service, things of that nature. And then you have the other side of this entity, right? We are stewarding resources that have to be used to perhaps purchase property or send missionaries or take care of children. And once you get into that aspect of it, things get fairly complex. And so being a church startup was some of the hardest work I've ever done. So I started in the marketplace. I used to work for a little company called Rico Lanier and felt this tug for a long time, wanted to avoid it. Ministry is not for the faint of heart, at least, and we can circle this wagon later, but at least vocational ministry in that regard, because I believe we're all in ministry of some sort, even in our marketplace industries. And so that transition was tough, and we started with nothing. We started with 2 people in my living room, no real resources. We didn't have a big bank to look to at first, and then we partnered with Perimeter Church, which is a great church here in the city. We would consider that our mother church, and they backed us pretty wonderfully, and was a little bit of wind in our sails. And since then, we've had an incredible journey. It's not all been fun. It's not all been easy, but over the last 10 years, we've owned 2 different properties. We just bought a new one, 12 and a half acres and about 80,000 square feet, about a mile from Truist Park, that we are going to be gathering in for the first time this weekend. And we've seen a lot of lives changed, and we've planted churches and sent missionaries, and it's been a wild ride.
That's awesome. And I think that's I think I understand the ministerial side probably more than most. Just my mom is a minister, and I think the place where you sit between balancing mission and resources or business is a very precarious spot to sit. And I think too, in the marketplace and in my job, I sit on that line as well. And I bet the extremes you see it, I would postulate there's some things that we could learn from that. What are some ways and some things that you're always balancing in that arena of, how do I keep the mission, but how do I also steward these resources in a way that's intelligent and responsible?
Yeah. I think you have to have principles. For instance, if the bottom line is the goal, well, then the mission could actually suffer for the sake of maintaining the financial bottom line. Sometimes there are risks that we've had to take to maintain the mission that would have looked foolish from a purist business standpoint. But because we have principles to guide those things, then it has helped us to make wise decisions. So, for instance, generally in a normal year, in a non-COVID year, right, we budget the following year based on 90% of the previous year's revenue. So that builds in an automatic buffer for us of 10% at the top of the year, so that we always have money for opportunity costs. If something exciting comes up or something that may further our mission comes up, then we don't have to worry about where we're going to get the resources from. So you do that over a couple of years, and you end up with a pretty healthy reserve, which, we have and have had. Now we're at a juncture now where we're starting to touch that.
For such a time as this, right? Like,
yeah. We're starting to touch that a little bit. And so now it's recalibration. How far into these reserves are we willing to go before we make some difficult decisions? How far outside of our principles are we willing to go? So, again, principles. We don't generally want our personnel cost to exceed 45% of our revenue, but it's COVID, and most industries are down 25 to 30%. And so here we are teetering this line where our personnel costs are well over 45%. How far are we willing to endure that journey and the cost associated while trying to balance the reality? If you're in the marketplace, of course you have mission and resources and stewardship, but what you don't have is this spiritual dynamic attached to it. And so, the person on my staff is not just a staff member with a shared vision and a shared mission. They're also a part of this spiritual community. And so if they get laid off, well, do they stay at the church? Do they have to leave? Is it strange? They were pastor so-and-so, now they're just a guy in the church. How will the people adjust to that reality? All of those dynamics are at play, particularly in a season like this.
Yeah, definitely. I don't envy the role or the position of facing hard times. I know we've all faced some very difficult decisions right now as well. How do you find peace in making difficult decisions?
Yeah, I think primarily my identity is not wrapped up in my business, in the church. My identity is not wrapped up in our success or our failure. There's a book by Edwin Friedman called Failure of Nerve, which I think everyone should read. And the core principle in the book is about differentiation. And as a leader, being able to stay connected to the organization, but differentiate from it in such a way that the anxiety of the organization, the frustration of the organization, the tension of the organization, the fear of the organization does not consume you or become consolidated with your personhood. And that gives you a space to be able to make hard decisions and hopefully wise decisions without it crushing you, without it, robbing you of your personhood or making you wonder what type of person you are, particularly if you're making those decisions from a good place.
I think my mom has always told me this. She said, "Chad, write a list of undeniable truths, things that you will never bend. Anything that's not on that list, don't sweat it."
Yeah.
Like in church and in your personal life, in your business, like if it's not on the list, don't sweat it. And I think I think there's some deep lessons in there for a lot of people to stop focusing on things that just don't matter.
Yes.
In the grand scheme of things.
So many things mattered before COVID.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That don't matter anymore.
Yeah.
The scorecard changed, and I know we're not talking about this right now, but one of my biggest fears coming out of this is we won't learn the lessons we've been afforded.
Yeah.
That's my big fear for everyone, not just in my industry, in the political arena, in the marketplace arena, in our personal lives, that we've had a year to learn some valuable lessons. And if we are so focused on getting back to normal that we eschew the lessons that have been gained over this year, or if we just haven't learned them across the year, I think there are going to be some reverberations that will be particularly harmful in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good area to think through too. Is how can we as a people make sure that we hold on to those lessons? Like, what's the tip? What's the trick there? I think some of the things I've heard about in past podcasts is the importance of journaling and writing stuff down.
Yeah.
Is that a practice that you participate in, or is there other things that you do to try to make sure once you learn something, you don't have to learn it over and over again?
Yeah, I journal almost daily. But I think there's one level beneath that. So, when I think about ideation, or any thing that we accept cognitively or emotionally, then I think of it in layers. And I think at the lowest level, at the root layer, we prioritize what we love and what we value, right? That's what we do, period. And so if we love wisdom, right, if we love avoiding, to make a veiled biblical reference, if we love avoiding going around the mountain for 40 years, it was supposed to be like an 8-day trip. For those of you who are not, familiar with Christianity or Christian faith or even Judaism, this is the Moses story where they're leaving Egypt and they're going to the promised land. It's supposed to be 8 days. It took 40 years because they wouldn't learn the lesson on any singular time around. And so their love became their priority. Their love was self. Their love was meat pots back in Egypt, right?
Yeah.
Their love was comfort. Their love was security. And so they prioritized those things, which actually extended the journey. And so I think at that root level, yes, journaling is excellent. I have a counselor and a coach. I can parse those out if you guys want to dig into that. But at the root, it's really being honest about what you love and prioritizing it, or unprioritizing it when you realize what you love is actually harmful or unhealthy or inhibiting you from learning some of the lessons in any scenario, but particularly on the other side of a pandemic.
I think parsing those out actually is going to be very beneficial. I mean, so you have a counselor and a coach.
Yes.
Yeah, define those two roles and why having those people who fill those roles in your life has been important.
Yeah, it's actually pretty simple. My counselor is there to help me explore my inner world. My coach is there to help me navigate my outer world. And those serve two very different functions. So my coach helps me to make that integration and that transition from all of the work that I'm doing on my inner world as an emotionally healthy leader, as a self-aware leader, as a sympathetic leader. The coach helps me actually make the transition to how those things manifest themselves in the people I lead, in the different roles that I occupy.
Awesome. So much to dig into. You went through a lot of different roles, and I think some we hear often, some we don't, which is always interesting to see how people perceive their roles. One of the ones that you mentioned was athlete. Talk more about that one, because that's not one I usually hear a lot.
Yeah, I'm a lifelong athlete. I played football, soccer, basketball, baseball, wrestled. I ended up kind of honing in on wrestling and football in high school. I was an All-American at the University of Oklahoma. I'm sure Tom didn't tell you that. But I was an All-American there, and took my shot at making the world team in wrestling, got very close, and then played in the NFL for a couple of years. And so I've always considered myself an athlete, and I think if you are, you can occupy that role for life. The pace at which you train, the things that you choose to do change, but that is a real function of who I am and even how I perceive the world. Now, things have shifted. You know, we had leg day on Monday, and and I deadlifted. I got up to 365, which, you know, 10 years ago, you know, that's 12, 14 very easy reps. Well, at 40, you know, that's a 7 or 8, and my back hurts the next day.
I'm not even going to attempt to talk about it. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't even tell you what I bench press, man.
Yeah. So, you know, so just again, even with so I'll integrate these ideas. My counselor helping me explore my inner world, my coach helping me explore my outer world, accepting that I'm not the athlete that I was. It doesn't mean that I can't be an athlete. It just means that the scorecard has to change because there are new variables and new limitations associated with the season of life that I find myself in. And I think that is a lesson to be applied across any industry, across any role, across any field. And so that's why that's one of those roles I've never really let go, because it has shaped so many of my choices and so many of the perspectives I have in how I navigate the world. You know, even our church. Our church is very diverse, or it was. We'll see what's left when we start gathering again. And I say that tongue in cheek, but there is a reality where most pastors don't know how many people. I mean, is your mom's church still online, or are they physical?
They're online.
Yeah,
for the majority.
So we don't know. We have no idea. You know, you could have a pretty good idea when people were still in the room, and you knew that, hey, most people, they come on a Sunday 1.8 times a month. That is the average. So, you know, you're looking at, 1.8 times how many ever is in a room on a given week. That's the size of your church. Well, right now we don't know. And so there's an acceptance that has to happen, that there are limitations and variables in this season that do not allow me to operate the way that I operated 2 years ago before COVID as a leader. And that's a lesson that I'm learning as an athlete first, that is then applied secondarily in my role as a pastor.
There's challenges and things you have to learn to accept, but there's also so much opportunity in it.
That's right.
It's one of the stories I was talking with my mom about it is she's like, yeah, but at the same time, there are people up in Maine.
That's right.
Who are watching my church service. I don't know how they found it. I don't know why they're watching it. But they're all the way up in Maine, and that's an opportunity. And she's like, I'm one of these guys I've been able to have a great conversation with back and forth, and he never would have met, never would have seen, never would have known anything about us had it not been for that. So I think there's opportunity in that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we have a couple from Abu Dhabi. So say how?
Yeah.
How did you find us? Brazil, California, all over the place. And so I do think, again, the opportunities can only be seen when you accept it. Because if you don't accept it, you're still fighting for the old thing. And so you're not worried about guy in Maine. You're not even online, because church is not church unless it's in the building, right? And to walk it back the same way with athletics. Well, because I've accepted the limitations of where I am, I actually now have the opportunity to explore new forms of physical fitness. So I'm doing Pilates now. I'm doing yoga now, which is very taxing.
We'll have to get some B-roll.
I'll throw up my downward dog. I mean, but it really is, as a younger man, I'm like, oh, whatever, that's nothing. Oh, no, it's something. And hot yoga is a whole other level. But those are, to follow your logic, those are opportunities I would have never discovered had I not accepted the reality that I've actually found myself in.
That's amazing. I think there's so many good lessons from the sports world, honestly, that I feel like I've missed out growing up because I wasn't an athlete. And I've never really been passionate even really about watching the sports. However, I do love my Braves now. But I feel like there's a whole kind of ecosphere, a whole set of lessons that I could have grasped had I attempted that. And to be clear, I think my lack of participation wasn't necessarily a lack of. I wrote it off as a lack of talent, but I think it was a lack of confidence. Really, I never wanted to put myself out in that way. So coming from the lessons and the things that you've learned as an athlete, how would you what could you say to somebody just to say, hey, you know what? There's so much more there for you to experience, and all it takes is putting yourself out there, and how important that's been to your life.
Yeah. To quote the great Yoda, there is no try, there is only do. I think there just has to be a tipping point where, and so much of this is wrapped up in identity. These are some of the things that I wrestle with as a father. If I can help my children have self-awareness and not have their view of themselves wrapped up through other people's lenses or how people see them, and teach them differentiation, that you are differentiated from your environment. You stay connected, stay close. We're not talking about coldness or callousness. We're talking about an individual able to exist healthily in interdependent ways. And I think that is the key. That's the goal, is helping people find themselves, accept themselves, understand that their identity is not rooted in their successes or their failures, because all of us succeed and all of us fail. And that creates a space, even if it's not confidence, it creates a space to take chances. And you may find, that you're actually gifted at something that you didn't even know you were gifted at. I'll reverse it. I didn't know that I was a good student. I graduated high school with a 2.9. I graduated my undergrad with a 2.7.
That's right. C's get degrees, baby.
And I've had 4.0s through all of my master's degrees. And I have a 4.0 in my doctoral program right now. But I had so determined, well, I'm a jock, I'm an athlete, that's what I do, that's for those people. I had talked myself out of a love for books, a love for knowledge, a love for understanding. I literally talked myself out of all of those things. And unfortunately, my parents, as wonderful as they were, didn't have the tools to guide me toward them. And they just kind of let me, develop this identity, this incomplete version of myself that I've spent the last 10 years trying to add those pieces to.
That's amazing. Amazing advice. I think something that will hit really home for me after this interview is I need to talk myself back into, I can do it. Even at 36, with 4 kids, I can put down my excuses and get that experience that I've shortchanged myself on, and it's not too late to get it, and it will only help and build me as a more well-rounded person. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, man,
for that
absolutely.
view.
Absolutely.
Something else we haven't talked too much about. You said you're a father. Let's dive in there, right? How many? You're in the same club I am.
That's
with
right.
The 4-kid club, right?
That's right.
And we were talking a little bit before. What's the span?
13 to 3.
13 to 3.
Yeah.
And 3 girls, 1 boy.
Yep. Girl, boy. Surprise. Little girl.
Awesome. That's amazing. And
we call her Vacation Baby.
Vacation Baby. And that's just a whole new level of busy you throw into the mix. So how do you transition from, minister, business person to daddy?
Yeah. I'm a big believer in rituals. And, I guess rituals is a fine word. I don't know what anyone else would call it. But you mentioned something before we started, that you have found that your day is exponentially better when you open it up with some inspirational music, right? So that's a ritual. And I have morning, afternoon, and evening rituals that anchor my day. And that afternoon ritual is what helps me transition from board member, pastor, leader guy, CEO guy, whatever dance I'm dancing that day. That afternoon ritual is what helps me transition. And I do the same thing nearly every day. Sometimes things get disrupted, and you don't want so much rigidity in any system that there's no flexibility. But for the most part, I do my afternoon ritual every day, and it helps me ease my way into my daddy role so I can be fully present for the kids.
Can you share?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'd love to know what your ritual is.
Yeah. So generally about 3:00, I take a walk, especially if the weather's nice. I get some air. I come back. I do a 10 to 15 minute meditation, a guided Christian meditation. And then I follow that with an extended period of deep work. So if there's something that I didn't finish that day, if I have a spark of creativity during that meditation, which often happens, I'll have a new idea. If there's a bow I'm trying to tie on a project, or even just hammering out my inbox, I take 25 to 35 minutes of just strong, deep work. There's a book, I believe Cal Newport wrote that book on deep work, which is excellent. And I do a lengthy period of deep work. And then, and this is going to sound crazy, maybe to some, but I take 30 minutes and I just sit and think. And there's a wealth of research, and I could prove it to you, that particularly for CEOs or C-suite leaders or entrepreneurs, sole proprietors, carving out time in your day to just sit and think might be the most important thing you do, because it was in those spaces before you started your business, before you had millions in revenue. That's where the ideas happened. That's where the magic happens. And we get our heads down so far into the doing and the running of the organization that we never pop up long enough to continue to dream. And it's the dream that got us here, right? And so I try to spend 30 minutes every day, literally, just sitting and thinking. Sometimes I think about nothing. Sometimes I think about a lot of things. Sometimes I run through my next day. If I have a talk coming up, I treat my talks like a roadmap. And so I make sure I know where all my signposts are and where my turns are. If you've ever heard a speech or a talk or a sermon and you're like, how did we get here? Well, it's because they didn't tell you the left turn was coming, right? And so transitions become the most important part of any talk. So I'll spend time on those transitions. There are any number of things that'll happen in that space. And then I pull out my full focus planner, and I'm not being paid to plug that. And I run through my day for the next day, my 3 big things. So every day there are 3 big things that I want to accomplish that will move the mission forward. I may not get anything else done, but if I can get those 3 big things done, then I've had a successful day. And then I write out, any other little task or a meeting I may have or whatever, and I just write out my whole day. I close my full focus planner, I put my hands on the table, I say a quick prayer, and commit my day to the Lord, and then I'm done. And I'm fully present with my family. I don't think about anything else other than those people who are in front of me.
It's amazing. I think just thinking through it, so much of that is, I don't think I've sat down to call it a ritual. But at the same token, I know if I can sit and think uninhibited before I go home, then I know I'm not going to do that when I'm sitting there and my wife is trying to talk to me.
That's right.
I think that's when I get in trouble. It's like, Chad, are you there? Well, I didn't get my stop and think time. And so now I'm thinking, and then you find something to think about and you're hooked for the next 15 minutes.
That's right.
And so I've never drawn that connection, but I think that's amazing, is that space to think, especially strategically placed so that you can think out.
Yep.
And then write down the next day's to-do list, because there have been times when that's happened. Then the next thing I do is pick up my phone to send myself an email to think about it, which is mistake number 2 if you're spending time with your wife.
Because then you open your email,
right?
And there's an email that you didn't necessarily need to see that evening.
Yep.
And even if you don't answer, you're preoccupied with it. So yeah, that's another thing is that our house phones go off at 6:00. So.
And you also have another house rule, which we talked a little bit beforehand, but I want to make sure we have time to talk about too, because I love how simple and overarching it is. We were talking through. I'm entering into the teenage years, and I've got my 11, soon to be 12 years next week, 12-year-old.
Oh, fantastic!
And just like. Man, like I am no longer the smartest person in his universe. So everything I say is apparently now up for debate, or
Yeah.
or there's a better way to do it, and all of that. And so we're finding ways to try to navigate this challenging time of having a teenager who, one, like I said, no longer sees me as the smartest person in the room, but then two, also, there's so much sarcasm in the world these days, which I think is so unhealthy. And so, he spends days at school, and it is the mechanism for a relationship there sometimes, because it's funny or whatnot. And then you come home and you're sarcastic though, and it's a different attitude. And so I'm trying to preach and knock that out of him. We have a 0 sarcasm rule in our house right now.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about your household rule and how you're managing the teenage years.
Yeah. So my eldest is 13, soon to be 14, and the one coming behind her is 11, soon to be 12. So she is both sarcastic and middle child syndrome. Yay. So we really only have one overarching rule, and it's 3 words. We speak life. That's it. There is enough in the world to chip away, to cut, to carve, to diminish, and no matter what side of the aisle you are on politically, we likely have not seen more of that than we have in the last 4 or 5 years. And we don't want that to be the culture of our house, right? Words shape culture, period. And so we've chosen to speak life. And that's the only thing, really, that you'll get in major trouble for in our home is if you are biting, cutting, sarcastic. We don't do that. And everything else is fairly negotiable. I don't pick every fight. I do my best not to pick every fight. You want to wear something crazy? As long as your hindquarters aren't hanging out, that's between you and how crazy you want to look. You want to put on big fake nails and paint them 3 different colors. Hey, whatever. But you're going to turn to your sister and say, "Were you born this stupid?" No, we're not going to do that. And because they're also teaching the younger ones. My son is 5, my youngest daughter is 3, and they emulate what they hear from their older sisters. And this is the long conversation we had is you are resisting the culture that I'm trying to set for our family company. Because I'm saying we speak life. That's our culture. You're speaking death, negativity. And now you're passing down that culture so that I'm going to have to reteach these lessons to the younger two. And so we just, we have a lot of talks. We're a very conversant family. I believe in spanking up to a certain age, and so leave it in the comments if you don't like it. I'll be okay. But we try to talk to and reason with our children because we want them to be reasonable people. So another related idea. I wouldn't call it a rule, but a related idea. I don't know is only an answer for something you truly don't know. I don't know is not an excuse to own, or to not own, rather, what you did. So if I ask you, why did you do that? I don't know. Yeah, no, there's an answer. There is a why. There's a reason. So you can spend the next hour writing why you did this or didn't do it, or you can just tell me now. We can talk about it. That kind of stuff, I feel, has really helped us not avert the difficulty of raising, hormone-filled, crazy miniature adults. But it's certainly put us in a position to have the right conversations and hope for the best, If they're going to fail big, I'd rather them fail under my roof than be so constrictive as a Christian parent that once they get out of those strictures, it was only my clamp that was actually holding them in place. I want them to have reasons. I want them to have a why, as Simon Sinek would say. And that's kind of the guiding principle for the way I parent.
That's great advice. I think so many things that we can learn from our conversation today. I think one of the big overarching ones is know your purpose and where you're headed. Don't sweat the small stuff.
That's right.
be well-rounded, have a counselor and a coach so that you can internally reflect and have somebody who can help you position your outward to align with that. Rituals can help you make transitions and be very intentional with being fully present when you want to be fully present.
That's right.
And on what you're trying to be fully present on. And then from a parenting standpoint, I think one of the biggest things is just how simple it is. It's like boil it down to that one, we're speaking a life. And that for you in a religious context, that makes, sense of what life is for you there, life for your cultural aspects of positivity and all the things you do. It's a simple rule that can span all of those things. And I love that it's just like, hey, if every kid is on the same page, then that helps. So thank you so much for all of those insights and for sharing. And kind of the last role we'll dive into a little bit is you as a husband, right? So one of the guys that I've talked to in the past recently, he said, you know how your kids come to you sometimes as they get older and they're like, all right, which one's your favorite? And they would have played which one's your favorite game? He said the answer is your mom. and so I think you possibly share kind of the same view as I of how important nurturing that relationship is with you and your wife, and how it holds everything else together. What do you do intentionally to make sure that is healthy and is well balanced?
Yeah, we pursue each other. It's an agreement we made, and I know that sounds, I don't know, very C-suite, I guess, but all of life is a series of agreements, whether they're spoken or unspoken. If I choose to speak negatively to you and you choose to not respond, we've just made an agreement that I can talk to you that way and you can be talked to that way. So one of the things we've tried to do in these 15 years is verbalize all of our agreements. And one of those is we work to actively pursue each other, to know how the other receives love, and what they value and what's important. So even my rituals, I'll tie these ideas together. Presence is probably the thing my wife values more than anything in the world.
Presence as in gifts, or presence as being there?
Being there, okay. Yeah. Presence, not presents. Man, English is such a dumb language. But yeah, full presence. That's what she values more than anything. And I would say there was a stretch in our marriage where, of course, I'm doing a startup, and because my identity was so wrapped up in it, I was consumed by it, and so I would be physically there, but emotionally and mentally in 1,000 different places, and it hurt us, and so no, that would have been, if I'm doing my math right, that would have been like years 3 through 5, so these last 10 years have been a lot of buttressing some of those losses, and building in new pieces. So even my evening ritual was born out of trying to be fully present for her first and for the kids second. So, turning off my phone, being fully present for her first and for the kids second. So there have been a lot of choices I've made in the pieces of my rhythms. I don't believe in balance. I don't even know if we have time to get into that. I think balance is a myth. But there are a lot of pieces I've built into my rhythms that were specifically focused on pursuing her heart and loving her well. And she's done the same, physical touch and not just sexual touch, if I can say that on your podcast, but physical touch, a hand on a hand, a hug, a noozle. I like that because she's
power of the noozle, man.
Noozle, bro. Listen, because she's shorter than me, but not that much. I'm 6'4.5", 6'5" on a good day, and she's about 5'10", so she just fits right in this pocket so nicely, and that's a gift to me. That's very important to me. And she came out of a home where they don't touch each other. Like her mom still side hugs, like straight up hip to hip Christian side hugs, her own children. So imagine how that would form your idea of touch. So it's a real stretch for her to display that type of physical intimacy and emotion. And it's a way that she has labored to love me well and pursue me. And so that's how we cultivate that. And then everything else kind of builds out of that. And our kids know that. I tell them all the time, it's me and her and then y'all. We are one flesh. Y'all are additions.
That's right. Okay. Well, I was told y'all are gonna leave someday. She's not.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Unless you run her out of here, and then we're gonna have a whole other problem. So yeah, we prioritize each other. And she's my partner in ministry too. I mean, she co-founded this startup, so there's no me without her. While I was doing that and trying to live my dream, she was the one working. Holding down the fort and making sure we had food and lights and water. So we really are differentiated and in a lot of ways symbiotic at the same time.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, for your openness, for sharing. It's meant a lot to me personally, and I hope that anybody who watches this learns a little bit and can take a nugget away to help them as they try to figure out how to find balance. And for me, to be completely honest, balance, it's never about weighing two sides of the equation as much as it is about intertwining everything to focus on what really matters.
Yes. That's why I call it rhythm.
Yeah, I love it. I love the word rhythm. ExecuRhythm. Well, maybe we'll. But yeah, thank you so much for your time and for sharing. Now, the church, right, is Revolution Church?
That's a nice name.
Oh, okay.
But it's Renovation Church.
Renovation. I'm sorry. Yeah, Renovation
it's
Church.
All right. I like Revolution Church. Maybe a name change.
I'll change the podcast. So Renovation Church, and it's over near the Braves Stadium.
Yeah, 1775 Water Place.
Awesome. So a good place to go recharge and check out. And thank you so much for your time. And like I said, I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, brother. Thanks for having me.